Hi, guys. Welcome to another Monday night study. It's good to be back. We had several interesting things going on this last couple of weeks. I've been watching the developments in Israel and the developments in the politics and the possibility of a war. So that's kind of interesting. And I wanted to bring out a couple of things. And I know we've talked about it once or twice before, but I wanted to kind of do this directly. But I also wanted to notice or to mention to you several things tonight. Number one, we talked about it a little bit 2 weeks ago. By the way, last week we shut down and did not broadcast because we got a new granddaughter. And so that's going wonderfully. So anyway, this week we're back. And one of the things is that we decided to create a second channel. And the reason for that is this channel will continue just as it is. It's teaching. But we wanted somewhere, like there's several channels on YouTube where you can go and say, like, listen to the King James Version or the NIV or whatever, and it's the whole Bible. So you could pick any one thing or just listen to the whole thing. And usually they have the verses going by on the screen, plus it's being read. So we wanted to do that kind of thing with the Dead Sea Scrolls and the early church fathers and things like that. So we're working on that. So we have, this is our, and it's connected in here, so you can go to the bottom of this and find the second channel. But this is our second channel, Bible Facts Manuscripts, and it will be only text. Right now there's several studies on it and other things, and we're going to do that until we get we need 4,000 watch hours for it to be completely active, since it's a newer channel. So right now we have, I think, close to 500 watch hours. Anyway, what we've done here, as you can see, this is the kind of thing we want to do. This is 3 Corinthians. So we have a book called 3 Corinthians. It's got the history behind it, commentary with it. So that's very important too. But the actual text should be available to everybody for free out there. So I would ask, if you're interested, buy the book, help support the ministry. But at the same time, this will be here. This will help support us too, because as people listen to it, we'll get some ad revenue. But 3 Corinthians is our very first one. That's all we've got up there as far as this goes. And you can see basically how it works. And so we'll be talking and you'll go through and see the entire thing. So let me back out of here. What we will do is, let me go to the other one here. There we go. So what we will do is we'll have the newest manuscript, whatever we're working on currently, or the last thing we put up. We'll have Dead Sea Scroll related manuscripts and early church father manuscripts. So 3 Corinthians is in that one. Then there will be other playlists. So we're going to try to do that. I think it's going to work out really good for everybody. So right now, with our manuscript program on the second channel, we have finished 3 Corinthians, and it's only about 5 minutes. So we're in the progress of doing Gad. We're just about finished with Gad the Seer, chapter 1. So we will be putting those out there as far as we can. You can leave comments if you want to about, well, what next manuscript should we do? So there's several Dead Sea Scrolls, ancient history, Jewish ancient history works, church fathers. They're all kind of important. So I just wanted to let you know those kind of things and what we're doing. So as you know, this is on the Jewish calendar. This is the 9th of Av. Starts tonight, I believe, which should have already started. And there is a difference between the Dead Sea Scroll calendar and the modern Jewish calendar. So the actual 9th of Av, sometimes it's the same date, other times it's different. And we'll see that here in a little bit. But I wanted to give kind of an overview of the 9th of Av and why it's kind of important. We all know that Passover, for instance, Jesus came and died on Passover, fulfilling the ritual of Passover. And the church was born on Pentecost, fulfilling the ritual of Pentecost. And we do actually have some of that ritual now from the scrolls. And then we have the fall festivals, and many of us believe those festivals and those teachings, those rituals, point to what's going to happen in the future with the second coming. So there's a rapture, resurrection, a 7-year tribulation period, an antichrist, a millennial reign. All of that can be seen in the ritual. So, and it may or may not be correct. There's no biblical doctrine that says that. But since we know Jesus died on Passover and the church was born on Pentecost, we have a very good indication of those things. Now, the 9th of Av is one of those things. It's not a festival. It's not mentioned at all in Scripture, but it's a day that lots of things have happened to Israel over and over again. So I wanted to share that with you. So this is from our book, Ancient Messianic Festivals. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about the 9th of Av. It's called Tisha B'Av, or the 9th of Av. And lots of bad things happen. And we're going to go back and look at the history and the legends and stuff just real briefly. It's supposed to be, most of us remember a few of these things, like when Antiochus Epiphanes sacrificed a pig in the Jerusalem temple. That'd be about 162 or somewhere around 160 to 165 in that area BC. Antiochus Epiphanes doing that. Both temples were destroyed on the 9th of Av. So we want to look at some of those things. So there is a book, a history book put together, a modern history book called the Codex Judaica, and it's basically just any comments from the rabbis as far as dates are concerned. And it's accurate, like the modern Jewish calendar, up until the time of the Persians, and that's when it gets garbled, if you're following the Dead Sea Scroll calendar. But I just wanted to share a few things with you. So Jacob is his confrontation with Esau on his return from Canaan was on the 9th of Av. So I thought that was interesting. Didn't really know that until I researched it. The next one is that Moses sent the spies in on the 29th of Sivan. And these are the 10 spies that went in to spy Canaan. And if they came back and gave a good report, they would have went in. The Lord would have helped them take the land. But they were scared. And because of that, the Lord punished them by making them wander 40 years in the wilderness. So that's how that got started. So the spies actually went in on the 29th of Sivan and returned with bad news on the 8th of Av. And that night, the children of Israel bemoaned their plight and were condemned to spend the next 40 years in the desert. The next thing here from Jeremiah said he cursed the day he was born, and one tradition has that he was born on the 9th of Av. Again, I don't know about that necessarily, or no way to prove or disprove it, but the attack in Jerusalem was led by one of Nebuchadnezzar's ministers on the 9th of Tammuz, so it's the month before. The walls of Jerusalem were penetrated. On the 17th of Tammuz, the sacrifices ceased. So actually there is a kind of a secondary ritual for the 17th of Tammuz, the besiegement of the temple. Anyway, and then on Friday, the 7th of Av, they entered the temple and they feasted and vandalized it till late on the 9th, according to this. And then they set it on fire, and the fires burned for 24 hours. So anyway, the legend is that the first temple then was destroyed on the 9th of Av. On the 17th of Tammuz, the Jerusalem walls, and see, this is interesting too, how it's the 17th and then also the 17th. So the pattern continues. So on the 17th, just like before, the Romans managed to penetrate the walls and then set it on fire, and eventually it was burned on the 9th of Av, which would be 70 AD. So it's not just that the temples were destroyed on the 9th of Av, they were both breached on the 17th of Tammuz. So if patterns hold up, you're looking for something bad to happen starting around the 17th and going to the 9th. Roman governor Rufus plowed the hunt under the city of Jerusalem on the 9th of Av. And of course, the prophecy that would happen is in Micah chapter 4, I believe. And then the Bar Kokhba died in battle together with a large number of Jews, approximately 580,000. Many more died of starvation, and were killed on the 9th of Av. So the entire Bar Kokhba rebellion, if you think about it, was crushed on the 9th of Av. Also on the 9th of Av, in 1290 AD, England became the first European country to completely expel all Jews from its borders. Most of us remember 1492, which we'll see here in a minute. So we know there was a group of Jews, a large center of Jews in England, in Spain, in Germany, and in other places. And in different years, those countries would expel the Jews for whatever reason. So England did that on the 9th of Av, 1290. The Jews in France were arrested, their property was confiscated, and they were expelled in 1306. And this has it, it's the day after Tisha B'Av. So very interesting too. Since it's the day after, it kind of makes you wonder what the Jewish calendar, modern Jewish, and the Dead Sea Scroll calendar would say about that year. Which is one reason I would like to redo the Dead Sea Scroll calendar website. I would like us to be able to, right now you can type in a number between 1900 and 2100. But I would like to be able to cover the entire 6,000 years. If you think about it, it's only 6,000 lines of code. Or if you could do it in a graph of 10 each, it'd be 600 lines of code. As far as a program goes, that's pretty small. Anyway, something we need to do and work on. And then in 1380 or 1358, hundreds of Jews were massacred in Catalonia, in Spain. So the Spanish stuff began. And then it came to a head in 1492. Most of the Jews left Spain by the 9th of Av, settled in Turkey, North Africa, and Italy. Remember, the whole concept was by a certain date in 1492, if you were Jewish, you either convert to Roman Catholicism, you leave the country, or you die. Those are your choices. And that was, according to this, that would have been the 9th of Av. 3,000 Jews were killed in an uprising in Poland on the 9th of Av in 1648. Still a long time ago. And then all the Jews were expelled from Austria. They had to leave Vienna on or before Tisha B'Av, which is the 9th of AD, 9th of Av, in 1670. And then Germany declared war on Russia on Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av. So by this reckoning, World War I started on a 9th of Av. So that's what's interesting about it. It may not be just a Jewish skirmish or the slaughter of a bunch of Jews, but it could actually be a much larger war, or at least spill into a much larger war. So according to this then, and again, this is from the Codex Judaica, then Tisha B'Av, the 9th of Av, AD 1914, would have started World War I. And then in 1942, on the 9th of Av, began the mass deportation of Jews from the Warsaw Ghetto to the death camps. A daily rate of 5,000 or more. More than 200 Jews were killed in this place in Poland, Lithuania, the 9th of Av. So lots of interesting things about this. And we can go on and look at the stuff that happened on the 17th of Tammuz. But these are just, again, this has got nothing to do with the Bible. But when you see a pattern like this over and over again, it's kind of sort of connected to the temple. If the fact that we had two temples, they were both destroyed on the same date, that's interesting. You could always have the dedication on the same date because whoever's doing it picks the date. But when you have an enemy come in who's trying to break through, wants to destroy it, get the gold, and go home, he wants to do it as soon as possible. He's not going to try to humiliate you. Well, he might do that, but he's not going to risk losing the gold for the purpose of humiliating you. So, I mean, it's not possible that you would lose a war on the exact same date. So anyway, and you see all these other things too, all connected with these things. So this is a small history of the 9th of Av. But I want to show you one thing here. This is our Essene calendar for 2024. And of course, this is the month of Av, and it's the year 5949 according to the Dead Sea Scroll calendar. And as you can see here, the 9th of Av always falls on a Saturday. So it's a Sabbath. which I just thought was interesting according to this one. So it's the seventh day of the Festival of New Oil. Actually, it should be wine. Anyway, but today is the 12th of August, so we're down here. So as you can see, 12th of August, yeah. So we're a couple of weeks out. Now this can happen because the modern Jewish calendar will basically flip um, basically every 3 years. There's an extra month. They have a leap month because they're trying to start the year on a new moon. Whereas the Dead Sea Scroll calendar starts it on the Wednesday closest to the spring equinox. So the Dead Sea Scroll calendar is off, give or take 3 days, whereas the modern Jewish calendar is off, give or take 2 weeks. So big difference on a lunar calendar versus a solar calendar. So I just wanted to kind of show that to you. So it is interesting here when you look at August 12th, this is Monday. So on the Pharisee calendar, this would be the 9th of Av. So we're almost 3 weeks, over 3 weeks away. Not 3, 2.5, but anyway. So this is interesting to me to see if there was a major attack of Israel, half of Israel's blown up on an actual Tisha B'Av, on which calendar, if it even happened on that calendar. Again, when you have a nation that's angry at you, they're not going to pick a Tisha B'Av, most likely. I guess they could, but to lose a war or to win a war on that date would not be very likely. Anyway, but it's one thing we're looking for. The reports keep coming out about Israel possibly going to war here with Iran in the very near future, within hours or days, from what I keep hearing. Although I've been hearing that for about a week. But again, this is the time period on when these things happen. But I wanted to kind of share that with you. So there's 2 different 9ths of Avs. We'll see if any of them happen, a war breaks out on any one of them. It's interesting, the several wars have happened on the same date on the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, different dates on all the other calendars. So we'll see what happens. It'll be really interesting to kind of compile. But I wanted to also touch base with you on this prophecy. And first, I want to share one thing with you here, and we'll go to and look at the book of Enoch and kind of see how it talks about this war with Iran and Israel. But first, I wanted to share one thing with you. Here is, and I'm bringing up our e-sword, and let me see if I can get this bigger. That's better. Okay, so this is Revelation 9:14. Now, I bring this up because of a couple of interesting points. So go back with me here just to a little bit. In Genesis chapter 6, it talks about a time when the sons of God, the angels, came and accompanied with women, and their children were giants, and that was the Nephilim. And we've talked about that quite a bit on this channel, and it's been talked about on a lot of channels. But we've had a series on Enoch, basically showing the pre-flood Nephilim problem and how it was destroyed, how the Nephilim were created. It turned into 3 major clans, and then several other things about the prophecies that happened. And then, of course, they were all destroyed. And then the question arises, where did the giants come from after the flood? And we're planning on doing a in-depth series on that also. But we looked at the Dead Sea Scrolls that told us not only that same information, but told us how they did the genetic tampering back then, things like that. So really interesting study. And it's basically the same thing that we're doing now. Our scientists are thinking if we start changing certain genes, changing the DNA of people, we could fix problems. And of course, that's true, because some diseases are innately problems with the DNA. So if you could fix that, the diseases would go away. The problem is when you start tampering with things like that, other things go awry. If any of you out there are into computer programming, you understand how you could someone says, please add this feature to this program. You write a program, you know it works perfectly, you've tested it 100 times, you plug it in and it works fine, but somehow it breaks some other little piece of the program way over here. And at first glance, it's like, they're not even related. How did one break the other? But then you need a team of people to figure out what broke, how it broke, and how to make both of them work. And usually by the time you do that, the fix for that works, but ends up breaking something else. So it's a long, complicated problem. This is the same kind of a problem we have when we start tampering with the genes. This is a problem they had back then, and even back with one of the clans. We learned that it happened pre-flood, and it happened post-flood and continues. And so that's why the Dead Sea Scrolls tell us to stay away from genetic manipulation. So, but the reason I say this is because according to the Book of Enoch and the other scrolls, these angels were imprisoned. Okay. Now, my first thought is, okay, God said, you're done. So they would be imprisoned and they would not be able to get out. Nobody would bring them out except God. So that means they're going to stay there until Judgment Day. That would be my thought. And I wanted to share one thing with you, though. There's a difference between angels and the demons. The demons are the spirits of the Nephilim, the half human, half angels. Angels are angels, different species. So these angels are in prison. However, I want to share this with you according to Revelation 9:14 and go on. This is the sixth angel. And it says, this is the King James Version, saying to the sixth angel, which had the trumpet, loose the four angels which are bound in the great river Euphrates. The four angels were loosed, and they were prepared, which were prepared rather for an hour, a day, a month, and a year to slay the third part of men. Now, we understand the way this works is it's a large group of people that end up getting killed through plagues and famines and other stuff, but it's instigated by these fallen angels. So a lot of people ask, what does it mean here about this day and hour and month and year? It's almost like it's a riddle, a specific thing. And there might be more to it than I know. It might be a riddle. But at the very least, it's saying there's a specific year, and not just year, but month, day, and hour. So, I mean, in other words, God has it pinpointed. They're not going to get out 5 seconds before or 5 seconds late. There's a day and a month and a year and an hour even programmed for this or planned for this. So anyway, the main thing I wanted to show you with this is that in Revelation 9, we have four angels. There were over 200 that originally descended, according to Enoch and the other scrolls back in the Genesis 6 account, which is what we're talking about. So these four out of the 200 are released during the tribulation period. And whatever they do, however they do it, they end up slaying, which is killing, destroying, a third part of men. Now, you don't know if that's in a location or over the entire globe, but either way, it's a large group of people. So my point is this, is the angels are chained up. They will definitely be brought out and judged at the great white throne judgment, which is at the end of the millennial reign. But these guys, there's four at least, according to Revelation, that get out much earlier in the middle of the tribulation period. So if there is a fallen angel or two or three or, a small group of them that are released in the middle of the tribulation period, there could be other fallen angels released at other times. Okay, so that's the thing I wanted to share, because when I first read what I'm going to share with you, I thought, oh no, that's not possible. It's all at the millennial reign, at the end of the tribulation or end of the millennial reign, the great white throne judgment. But this shows that at least 4 or 1,000 years earlier. So with that, let me go to, and we're going to look at this. This is the book of Enoch, and this is chapter 56. And we're going to back up and read part of 55. And this is the part that talks about a war between Israel and Iran. So it's very, very interesting. So let's just read this here. It says, back up in this, it says in verse 3 of chapter 55, it says, "And this is in accordance with my command, when I desire to take hold of them by the hand of the angels on the day of tribulation and pain. Until this, my anger and my wrath will abide upon them, says God, the Lord of spirits. You mighty kings who dwell on the earth, you will behold my elect one," that was obviously Messiah, "how he sits on the throne of glory and judges Azazel and all of his associates and all of his hosts in the name of the Lord of spirits." So there's going to be a judgment day, okay, when the elect one, the Messiah, judges Azazel. And if you know anything about or have went through the book of Enoch or our Enoch series, Azazel was the first angel separate from the 200 that came down to do genetic experiments. He was successful in creating a small, however you'd want to call it, like recreating creation in his image, just in one small corner of somewhere, away from everyone else. It didn't bother anyone, but he was creating his own special thing. This is where you get the legends of people going out in the wilderness and then maybe finding something. They're out there by themselves. So he did this, and then after that, we have the 200 that descended on Mount Hermon, that took the oath, did the same thing, but with 201 now angels doing these experiments, creating different kinds of life forms. It completely messed up the planet. So Azazel is the one who started the whole thing, and he's the one that's going to be held accountable for it. So there's a certain time when the Messiah, Jesus, will actually judge what he did. So right now he is, according to the text, chained in a place called Bet Hadudo. It's about 12 miles away from Jerusalem. So it's in that area. The other 4 angels we talked about, according to Revelation, are under the Euphrates. The Euphrates is a very long river, so there's no telling exactly where they're at, but under there somewhere. So I tell you all this to say this. Look at this next part. Now, I saw, this is sometime, someplace in time, he says, I saw there the hosts of the angels of punishment going, and they held chains of iron and bronze. And I asked the angel of peace who went with me, saying, to whom are all these who are holding the chains? Where are they going? And he said to me, they're chosen and said to me, to their chosen and beloved ones, that they may cast them into the chasm of the abyss of the valley. And then the valley will be filled with their chosen and their beloved, and in the days of their lives will be at an end, and the days of their error. And from that time on will not be reckoned. So what happens is the fallen angels are taken, long story short, and chained up somewhere. And of course, that's what we're seeing. If Azazel is in Bet Hadudo, there's 4 angels somewhere under the Euphrates. That means there's other angels chained in other places. The 4 under the Euphrates get released in the middle of the tribulation period. So this is what happened. This is the basic concept of the imprisoned. Now look at this. Much later in time, something happens. Look at this very carefully. And in those days, and that's a phrase that means, when things begin to happen of a certain thing. So it could mean anything. It's around surrounding the time when an event happens. Like you could say in the days when the Messiah is born, or in the days when the Messiah starts the church. That could be 10, 20 years before or after, 32 AD. So something like that. We're talking about or going to talk about a certain prophecy. And it says, in those days, the angels, at least some of them, and we're talking about those fallen ones that are chained, will return and come to the kings of the east. with the Medes and the Persians. Now, the Persians, of course, that's the modern state of Iran. Anciently, the mountain part of what we call Iran today was Persia. Remember Cyrus and the Persians. And then the coastal part was called Elam, a different ethnic group. But these things change a lot. We're not really looking at an ethnic group. We're looking at a place so that you can identify it. So at this point, you might think we're talking about the Medes and the Persians as far as like Cyrus, that kind of thing. But the way this describes itself, it happens at the end of time. So it's not Cyrus necessarily, but it has something to do with the Medes and the Persians. So specifically Persia. Now, Persia is Iran. So this is interesting because first off, there's going to be a problem between modern Israel and Persia, and it's going to explain exactly what happens. But it happens because in those days, somewhere in that time period, there are fallen angels who were chained that have apparently been released and have come to the east, along with the Medes and the Persians and the other peoples of that time period or of that group. So that's spooky. If you think about it, and the historians will tell you this, the Iranian people are great. They were always friends with Israel. The Shah of Iran was friends with Israel. A certain government helped the Shah be overthrown, and I assume by mistake, but for whatever reason, helped establish the government that's there now, not realizing how dangerous it could be. And then somehow from that time period going, it's been, I think in the 80s or so when that happened. But you can go back and look and see from videos, the people in the 80s, they dressed and acted just like we do. So no problem. But something happened in Iran. Now we do have the prophecy of Jeremiah 49 that also talks about what happens in Iran in the later times. And the church that's growing, apparently growing very fast in Iran, is excited because they really expect Jeremiah 49 to be fulfilled in their lifetime. So our brothers and sisters in Iran, we need to keep them in prayer. There's a lot of persecution over there and in many other parts of the world. So we need to keep all the persecuted brethren in prayer. So let's read this. In those days, the angels will return and come to the kings of the east, along with the Medes and the Persians, which would be Iran. They will stir up these kings so that the spirit of unrest will come over them, and they will rouse them from their thrones, that they may break forth as lions from their lairs, and as hungry wolves among the flocks. So these fallen angels set up the kings, the government, the military of Iran to do something. It kind of inflames them, right? And so to who and what? Verse 6 says, they will go up and tread underfoot the land of his elect ones, which would be Israel. The land of his elect ones will be before them as a threshing floor. Now, a threshing floor, that's an idiom, but it has a couple of different meanings. It can mean they just like pick it up and scatter it and destroy it and it's gone, having complete control over it. Or it could mean it's causing a division, or separating, much like the Lord allows persecution to make everybody take sides once and for all. So that kind of a thing. And it could also actually be not an idiom like that, but just a reference to the fact the threshing floor of the Jebusites is what David took and bought for the foundation of the temple. So the point is the attacking Jerusalem, Israel or Jerusalem specifically. So it'll be before them as a threshing floor and a highway. Okay. But the city of my righteous, that's definitely Jerusalem, which is not necessarily just that city, but that's the capital of Israel. So we're talking about the nation of Israel. So the city of my righteous will be a hindrance to their horses and they will begin to fight amongst themselves. Now, it's interesting to me, a lot of times we look at these things and we think, well, horses and chariots and things like that, arrows, those are words that can mean a lot of different things. And I forget what it was, but horses specifically means something that, like a horse that gallops swiftly. It's low to the ground, but it gallops quickly, and you can't put barricades in its way. You know, where a human would have to stop and go around it, climb it, scale it. The horses just kind of jump around like that and basically almost don't stop. They just sail right on through. So it's a swift flying either animal or an object. A chariot in modern Hebrew is also called a tank, and a flying arrow is also called a missile, especially if it's an arrow without a bow. A bow and arrow is a bow and arrow, but if it's just arrows fly. So when you read this, you have to understand it was written a long time ago, but there's no way to use a word that hasn't been invented yet. The words are not invented until the objects are invented. So in this case, when it's talking about a hindrance to their horses, it could be horses, or it could be low-flying missiles, or unmanned units like the drones. It's probably what we're referring to, low-flying drones. So the city of my righteous, Jerusalem, will be a hindrance to their horses, their drones, their attack vessels, and they will begin to fight amongst themselves. And their right hand will be strong against themselves, and a man will not know his brother, or a son his father or his mother, until there'll be no number of their corpses through their own slaughter. And this happens a lot. You see it a lot in the Old Testament, where you've got two nations coming against Israel. Like one time Edom and Moab came to attack. Another time it was one nation. But somehow, no matter it's one nation or two, the Lord sends confusion. They mean to attack the innocent. So the Lord sends confusion, and one half of the army believes the other half of the army is Israel. And that half of the army really believes that half of the army is Israel. It's not even that they believe that Israel's infiltrated them and they need to wipe them out or something like that. They actually think, they don't know that they're brothers. It just doesn't click that that's the general in my army. This is whom I'm fighting with and for. You just think he's the enemy, and you fight until you mutually destroy each other. So it's one of those things, they have that planned for Israel, and God allows them to do that to themselves. And that's why I'm not a pacifist, but a lot of times we worry about things like that, that God can step in and will, according to prophecy, step in at the right time and do the right things. That doesn't mean you let people walk all over you, or you attack your country, attack your family. But there's a lot to look at here. So this is what's going on here, just like that time with Edom and Moab back in Kings. It was interesting because the prophet said, in this case, don't bring your arms and your swords and your armor and that kind of stuff. Put everything down, come in normal clothes with big knapsacks, set on the side of the hill, and watch the show. And then the armies came to attack. They slaughtered each other. And then the prophet said, now go pick up the loot, the food and everything, go back home and have a feast with your families, because the Lord has delivered you. And so it's really interesting to see that. At that point, no Israeli fought in there, or no son of Israel, children of Israel. They did not fight in there. So there's nothing that they really did. It was all God at that point. And we see this in the battle of Gog and Magog in Ezekiel 38. All that stuff, we usually focus on the stuff in the first part of the chapter. The last part of the chapter talks about the Lord sending a division in the enemy, and the same kind of thing happening. Their right hand will be strong against themselves. They won't know a man from his brother, or a son from his father or mother, till there's no number of the corpses through their own slaughter. Their punishment will not be in vain. In those days, the mouth of Sheol will open and they will be swallowed up in it. So it sounds like a massive earthquake. Sheol will devour and destroy the sinners in the presence of the elect. Now, that could be symbolic of something, but remember when Moses and Aaron were starting the nation of Israel, they brought them out of the Exodus, and it was Moses' older cousin that said, well, actually, I'm older, I have the right, the firstborn, I should be the one to rule. And they, Korah in his group. And so they separated each other and asked the Lord to decide. And the Lord sent an earthquake, and it actually split, swallowed up Korah and all of his group. So those things have happened in the past, literally. These prophecies may or may not be literal, but we've got the same kind of a concept going on here. Now, we'll stop here in just a minute, but I want to share you one more thing. I think chapter 57 is the Gog-Magog war. Not exactly sure, but this is a war that happens with Israel and Iran, the Persians. But this is interesting. It came to pass after this. So after this war with Iran, I saw another host of men riding on wagons. Now, again, wagon or chariot, that would be a tank, and coming on the winds from the east. Now, usually that phrase is on the sea, a very swift, a sailing boat. It's flying on the sea very quickly. Or a horse could be like galloping very quickly, flying very quickly. Also the word for horse anciently usually just meant horse, but sometimes it meant a low-flying swift bird. So again, the same idea. It's like you can set up booby traps or something, but it's flying and either leaping or flying over so that it's not stopped. It's just very quick. But I wanted to point this out on you. So there's another war that happens after this. Now, if it happens immediately after this, it's basically the same war, or because of that war, consequences. So it's some time after this, not necessarily hundreds of years, and that wouldn't fit either because they wouldn't be connected. So they're connected somehow, but sometime after this, there's another host of men riding on tanks, some of them coming in coming on the winds, which would be missiles, planes, helicopters, maybe something flying in from the east and from the west to the south. And it talks about the noise of their wagons was heard, and it's not a normal wagon. So very interesting there. So we'll stop there for tonight, but I wanted to share that with you. So number one, this is interesting to me that there is some time in the future. And this is another reason why, this can't be the Medes and the Persians, because this one right here, when it says, it came to pass after this. If it's 100 years, or in the case of Cyrus, it'd be a couple of thousand years, afterwards. So if it's 2,000 years later, it's not connected at all. If it happens like within a couple of days of the war ending, it's an extension of the war. So there's got to be a certain amount of space between it, but it can't be very long. So since the one that happens sometime shortly after this is the one with tanks and flying missiles and things like that, and it may or may not be the Magog War, but it's a modern war for sure. So that means this one is that also. And I think it's interesting, again, right here, those angels in those days will return and stir up the Persians to this particular thing. So it's interesting to see. So we have fallen angels. We know as Christians there are different religions that are good and evil. There are different ethnic groups. I shouldn't even say ethnic groups, really. They're just certain political or certain mentalities that think that certain things are bad and certain things are good. Um, it's easy when someone is trained, like in racism or in, whatever, someone to come along and start fueling the flames, so to speak. These guys are really bad. You should do something. And you keep pushing, and eventually they do that. So apparently that's what these fallen angels are doing. So sometime that happens. I had a Telegram channel, a friend of mine, Aaron Lipkin, made a comment, and I don't know if he meant to say this or not that way, but it looks like we're getting close to the first full-scale war between Israel and Iran. And I thought that was interesting that he said first. And he may have just meant the idea that the last one wasn't really a war. They sent missiles, missiles were wiped out. They didn't really retaliate in kind anyway, so it's not like a war. But this one might be the first war, meaning the other one wasn't a war. But the way he said it, it almost seems like he's like, this is the first one in connection with the second. May have been referring to this, but we will see. But I just wanted to share that with you tonight. So there's a lot of interesting things to go. So bottom line, if I just kind of recap this, I don't think anything's going to happen on the 9th of Av per se. I mean, it could. I don't know that it's necessarily connected, other than the fact that if you are all, in prayer for whatever reason, it's a holiday, you're not looking, that would be a good time to attack, that kind of stuff. It's like you wouldn't attack Russia or the United States when you have a strong president. If the president dies and then they get another president in real quick, say like within a week, they take over and everything's fine and they're just as strong. If you wanted to attack that nation, it would be between the time of the one that dies and the new one's installed, when there's a little bit of chaos. So if you know Tisha B'Av or Christmas or, something like that, that might be a good time to attack when people are looking the other way for whatever reason. Okay, well, let's look at the comments here. We'll go through here and look at these. Let's see. Oh, something clicked off. Okay. Melanie King became a member level Seraph. Thank you very much for supporting the channel. Really appreciate that. And then a servant became a member level Angel. Thank you very much. It's good to see you guys are really interested in the scrolls and wanting to study, and really appreciate you supporting us. What is the 2026 prophecy? Oh, we're going to get to that here in the next, probably starting next week. I've already released earlier today, well, the members got to look at it first, but earlier today, the first part of that. And I think, let me see if I can get that real quick. Okay, this is kind of what I've been thinking of doing. So first we'll start off with, actually it's 1 and 2, it ended up being 5 small ones. But we start off with number 1, talking about the DSS calendar, so we can figure out for sure what year is this. Don't care about the days and the festivals necessarily, but starting off, what year is it? And then we go back and plug in the calendar and also look at the prophecies, because it's really important to know the two of them, because some of the prophecies are rock solid, but there's a couple of points where they don't seem to fit. And it's like that's good, but how does this go with this? And it doesn't really. And a lot of prophecy scholars have said, I don't know, the numbers come out right, that had to have happened. Exactly how we can determine the start or how they connect, don't know, but apparently it happened. Well, with the Dead Sea Scroll calendar, now in certain cases, we know how they connect, or the exact time periods, and so it works out perfectly. So that's what this first one is. Second one will be about 32 AD, the prophecies about the Messiah's death. And then 1948, the prophecies about the rebirth of Israel. And then in 1967, the prophecies about the taking of the Temple Mount. And then 2026, if I'm looking at it right, there is a Dead Sea Scroll that gives us a 70-year count. After Israel comes back, they make a mistake. And then from that mistake, they don't rectify it, and 70 years goes by. And then that 70 years is rectified at that time period. So the 70 years, for instance, from when they first started in 1948 would, I think it's 2017 or 18. So that would already be over. So what we're doing is going through and looking at the things that could be a mistake in what the Lord has told him to do, a breach of covenant. We'll look at that prophecy, but it's a specific one out of the Dead Sea Scrolls. It's actually from the Apocryphon of Jeremiah. And he's not talking about, he's very clear, he's not talking about the 70-year captivity of Israel under the Babylonians. This is a totally different one. He talks about the 7-year tribulation period and the fact that that is inside a Jubilee period, which would be the last generation, that generational period. So a 7-year period in a 50-year period. And then in that 50-year period point somewhere is the end of a 70-year prophecy. So it's really interesting. So sometime between sometime between 2025 and 2075 is that Jubilee period. Sometime in there is a 70-year prophecy that ends. So if we can figure out the beginning, we can figure out the ending. So there's a couple of different possibilities of what it would be. The first one is in 2026. So we'll talk about that this month. We're going to get to, like I say, this first one's already released, and we're going to have the 32 AD, 1948, 1967, and 2026. So these are timeline prophecies. Almost all of the prophecies in the Bible, in the scrolls, basically say there's a time when this thing happens, and it describes the thing. And we get excited when once in a great while it'll say, oh, this thing is right after this thing. So now we can like put two of these together. Still don't know where that is in time. But once in a while, we have a timeline prophecy. So we have one for 32 AD, 1948, 1967, and I believe 2026. So very, very interesting. And then we'll go into Daniel's empires, Noah's empires, and then the Roman Empire, how that might be forming or reforming, and some of the other things. So that's what I have planned on doing. So we will definitely get there. With the rising Middle East tension with Israel, what are some of the specific prophecies we should be watching that could be fulfilled? Well, number one would be Obadiah. Obadiah has prophecies that occurred in 1948, but then it also talks about sometime thereafter that they would take over the coastline from the Brook of Egypt, so that would include the Gaza Strip, and it would go all the way up to Saraphan, Lebanon. In Obadiah, it talks about Zarephath. It's the old town where Elijah raised the widow's son. And that is really close to the Litani River, which is probably going to be the new border when they get done with it. The problem is that the Hezbollah keeps attacking, and you need to have them on the other side of a mountain range, not on this side, so that they can rain down rockets on you. And the groundwork for that's already been done. They're supposed to have like a peacekeeping force or however that works. But Hezbollah is not supposed to ever go south of the Litani River. And so Israel now has justification and wants to push them north of the Litani River. And right north of the Litani River on the coast is Saraphan, Lebanon, or Zarephath. So really interesting prophecy. Some of the other prophecies are they finally colonized the entire Negev. The tribe of Benjamin is found, migrates in mass to Israel, and occupies, I believe, Gilead. There's other Jews that occupy southern Lebanon and others that occupy the Negev, and in other words, their borders grow. With that, there's a lot of detail to those, like not just in Obadiah, but in Zephaniah and a few other things. And then when you plug in Jeremiah 49 and Enoch, you have the war with Iran, and there might be two separate ones, the way it's looking. But Not now, but I mean prophetically, the way the text reads. There's also the Gog-Magog war, so you want to be looking at Russia coming down. Right now, from what I'm hearing, um, Russia could, help out its allies and come and attack Israel, and probably would. That's what they're supposed to do. They have an alliance, and they gave some weapons to them, so they're kind of helping. But they're in the midst of a war themselves, the Ukraine. And I think it's interesting how things just accidentally happen just at the right time to make things speed up or slow down. So, in the last few days, what has happened is presumably with American weapons, but that still is not sure. But the Ukrainians have actually invaded Russia and have taken over a province. I don't know how big it is, but because I haven't looked into it, but that's pretty interesting. Invading Russia and taking part of Russia over. They actually have fired missiles or drones or something at an air base or airstrip rather in Moscow. So that's pretty interesting too. So that's really going to cause them some problems. And I think from what I've heard, nobody said this directly rather, but from what I've heard, it seems like they're saying something along the lines of, if you don't come down and invade or help Iran or whatever, if you stay out of it, we will not give advanced technology to the Ukrainians. So, I mean, if you think about it, every time Russia gives the new missile system, the new radar system that can't be broken, the biggest, best ever to Syria or somebody, Israel still just waltzes right in there, bombs their targets, and comes out, and nobody can see why. They're not on radar or anything. So every time the newest and best and greatest, Israel seems to ignore it and not have a problem with it. And that could be God, but whatever is doing it. So if they're saying, okay, you stay out of our neck of the woods, we won't supply your enemies with the technology that you can't even do anything about. And so that's kind of, at this point, I think it's creating kind of a balance of power. Now we know sometime something happens and that war occurs. That's Ezekiel 38 and 39. So we have that. We also have the Psalm 83 war, which may be a part of one of those, but Psalm 83 is another thing that's mentioned. And Isaiah 17 is the destruction of the city of Damascus. And it specifically says it's because of what the children of Israel do. And that kind of a language, it's not like they attacked us, so Israel came in and wiped them out. That's the way it would read in the Old Testament. But this is more like it's something that they did, like not even a mistake per se, but that was not the intent, but it happened. So my theory, just a theory on my part, is that they keep bringing in weapons and Israel sees them doing it. They're not going to let them fire the weapons at the country. So they come in and they bomb the weapon depots and then problem solved until they bring in more weapons. My theory is that somewhere along the line, somebody brings in a chemical weapon or a tactical nuclear weapon or something like that. Nobody knows what it actually is, and it's just bombed like normal. But that destroys the city and makes it inhabitable for a while. So that's my theory that I think might happen, but we'll see what actually happens. But there's actually quite a few prophecies about that. So like I say, there's only the 4 or 5 that I know of timeline prophecies. Everything else is about an event that happens sometime. And we kind of all have to put those together. Those are a few of the main ones that I know about. Have you heard of Kim Clement or anything about him? Is he worth bothering to listen to? I have wondered that myself a lot. The thing is, Kim Clement made some predictions, and they seem to have come true, dealing with politics. But the thing is, if you pay close attention and if you have people like, I don't want to say spies per se, but if you have people that are on Capitol Hill that hear everything that's going on, you can kind of guess. And so, like in my life, this is not necessarily always the case, but it seems like it's always we have a Republican and then something, nobody's perfect, so something bad happens. So the people say, forget the Republicans, let's go Democrat. And then something bad happens. So then they say, okay, forget the Democrats, let's go back to the Republicans. So it seems like almost every other year, or at least term, because you can serve 2 terms. When that guy goes out, rarely do we get another guy of the same. Now that's not necessarily true with Bush and I mean with Reagan and Bush, but and some of the others. But it seems like that. So when you had Democrats, especially 8 years of Barack Obama, and then it was either going to be Hillary Clinton or Trump, no matter how good Obama was or how bad he was, something he did was good and something he did was bad. So most likely the logical thing is that it's going to flip. So he was basically saying President Trump is going to win, and he did. But he also said President Trump would serve 2 terms. That's probably likely based on patterns. So the fact that he won is based on a pattern, but he didn't serve 2 terms. Now, some people are saying, well, he didn't say consecutive. So if Trump wins this time, he really will serve 2 terms. So, yeah, I suppose so. So I don't know of anything directly that Kim Clement said wrong. There are other people that came after him, kind of on his shoulders, so to speak. The fireman prophet, and there was a few other guys like that made some predictions that were absolutely wrong. But Kim Clement's an interesting guy. And of course, he started to get off doctrinally. And Chuck Missler took him under his wing, talked with him. Doctrine got straightened out, and he continued. I have to wonder if a prophet can get doctrinally corrupted. I mean, I suppose so, but I don't know. There's just a lot of things there. I haven't studied it. I would love, if I had time, I would love to sit down and listen to all of his stuff and kind of make a decision for myself. Because as a Calvary Chapel guy, I believe that the prophecies and the gifts of the Spirit still work. So somewhere there's got to be a real prophet, and the scrolls kind of lead that way too. So do the early church fathers. So I've got some really interesting places to look, but we'll see anyway. So Kim Clement, I really don't know that much about, if he's worth listening to. So many of them are garbled. And one other thing, though, let's assume Kim Clement's a real prophet and everything he said is 100%. You know that on the internet, you're going to hear him say one thing, and then over here, you're going to hear him say the exact opposite because someone has taken it out of context. And then now with these weird deep fakes, there's a lot of stuff that you honestly look at it and cannot tell that it's not that guy. So we're entering to a really weird time period where it's going to be really hard to figure anything out. The only thing you can do is listen to him and then look and see what happens. Obviously, President Trump didn't do 2 consecutive terms at least. So we'll see what happens. I don't think Trump is going to be good enough. I mean, like if he doesn't get elected now, I doubt, well, he might be, but I don't think he'd be in good enough health to be elected 4 years from now. I mean, maybe, but that's just one of those guesses that are probably right. Depends on what the Lord wants, but so I don't know that much about him. It's about all I can say. Super chat, $10. Thank you. Walter Martin and Dave Hunt were good friends, but disagreed on the extent of the New Age influence on the hyper-charismatics. Your Fallen Angels and Ancient Paganism books, would they help on that issue? Maybe a little bit. New Age stuff, a little bit with the fallen angels, maybe, but and ancient paganism, mainly with the early church stuff, because like our book, Ancient Church Fathers, mainly because of the concept of the doctrines. you had cults back in the first century, just like the cults today. And cults are just people that say, I'm Christian, and they start with a Christian base, and then they just add whatever, paganism, psychology, some other religion, or New Age stuff. And among the Gnostics in the first and second century, you have a lot of what we would call now New Age stuff. So you save yourself by meditation and just all sorts of stuff like that. That we actually do have a book. Actually, let me try something here. Let me get to another. See if I typed it right. If we go to our bookstore, we have one book, The Early Church Fathers is what I was talking about, because that'll talk a lot about Gnosticism. We have the Demonic Gospels. Those are a collection of the Gnostic Gospels and other Gnostic writings, just selected passages where it shows you what their theology is and how twisted it is, so that you can find out that the Gnostic stuff really is demonic. And when you look at that, you will be saying, okay, well, that's like New Age, that's like yoga, that's like Hinduism, that's like this. It's not exactly, but kind of like that. And you'll get a feel for that kind of thing. Ancient paganism's one. And then that's probably it for that kind of thing in here. But this is all of our books for that we've written so far. Okay, next question is, congrats on the little baby. Thank you very much. So many prophecy teachers say we're in the rapture window of 2 Peter 3:8, the 6,000 year mark, and then the 7-year tribulation rapture window. But according to the Dead Sea Scrolls, it's 2025. So what do you think? Well, properly, it's according to the scrolls, it's 2075. So that's their calendar. And the thing you got to realize is, we all want the rapture to happen like now, and it may or may not. If you use the modern Jewish calendar, the year 6000 is over 200 years away. So something has messed up the calendar system. So 200 years or 51 years, and that's just to the year 6000 rather, according to what a lot of the early church fathers and rabbis and had said, and Levitical priests, they believe the year 6000 should be the time of the Messiah. He comes in the first coming, the year 4000, more or less, and he did 40 years early that time, if you think about it. Because the end of their age was 75. Jesus died and started the church age in 32, so like 40 years early. So properly, it's the same thing again at 75. It might go all the way up to the end of 75, or it might be early. If the major event we're looking for patterns the last 2,000 years, you've got something happening in 32 AD. So I don't know if that's going to be the rapture or what it is. And then 32 minus 7 years is 25, which again is the start of that Jubilee period, just like it was before. So there's a lot of parallels when you study the calendar system. So we're in the rapture window in the sense, according to the scrolls, the birth pangs, that time period, starts when Israel comes back and the old ones begin to speak. So the scrolls are revealed. So that all started in 48. We didn't have the theology of the scrolls until about maybe 20 years ago, something like that, right around the year 2000, late 1990s, I believe. So it's interesting. It is a window of things. Now, the Lord knows the exact day and hour and month and year of events. We don't, though. So I think it could happen at any time. I would love to set a date on it, even though you're not supposed to. If I find something that looks like a date, I will share it with you guys because, I didn't write it. Somebody else did. They're either right or wrong, but, just like a lot of the old Jehovah Witness stuff has the date of the second coming, and it was way back when. It didn't happen, but those things are written, and so I can come out and say, well, this guy wrote this at this time, and this is what he said. And in this case, we can look and see that it wasn't correct. If it's future, we'd have to say, well, I'll wait and see. But yeah, I'm really looking for all of those kind of prophecies, including the rapture, tribulation stuff, to be in that last generation, which starts in 26. And I'm really surprised, and that's just my guess, my feeling, but I'm surprised to see the Hamas war start last year. I would assume it'd be 2-3 years up. I would assume it'd be pretty quick, but it's interesting. Of course, it could drag out for a few years too. But we will see what all happens. But we are in that time period. We're seeing the fulfillment of Obadiah, obviously, and Amos, and several others. So hopefully that helps. Super chat, $100. Thank you very much for the donation. Again, we really appreciate all the donations. Question: our Gentile calendar says 2024, but I've heard there is somewhere 100 to 240 years missing in there. What's your opinion? As far as I know, there's nothing missing in the Gregorian calendar. It was supposed to start when Christ was born, but it was done several hundred years after that. So it was a little bit of a guesswork. So Jesus may not have been born in the year 1. It was probably like 2 BC, or some people think 4 BC, that kind of thing. But that's what it's based on. It's supposed to be based on the birth of Christ. And so they didn't do the leap years exactly right. So when you get up to the 1700s, they realized they were over a week off, and then they corrected it. So that still doesn't change the years at all. But that's all I know about. But now, as far as the Dead Sea Scroll calendar to the actual year, and then the modern Jewish calendar, there's 167 years difference. And there's things like the Seder Olam and other Jewish records from back in the day, 1st or 2nd century, that actually tell us who changed the calendar and why, because it was a problem back then. So we have a lot of data on that. So that lets me believe that as far as the year 6000, that it's in 2075, not another 150 some years later. And I believe we have a calendar section that gives some information. We're going to try to redo all those with good quality audio and video and charts and everything in the future. Do you think that there's any validity to Ron Wyatt's claim to finding the Ark of the Covenant? I really don't know. The problem with that is when you say, I saw angels and they told me this, and then you go there and apparently the angels took the stuff with them. It sounds fishy, but there's no way to really disprove it either. So I really don't know for sure. We know the Ark of the Covenant is something that is important. We know that when Messiah returns, this is part of Zephaniah, I think it's Zephaniah chapter 3. Yeah, Zephaniah. About when the Messiah comes and is ruling from Jerusalem, then the daughter of the dispersed ones that is in Ethiopia will bring a special offering. So it's an ancient relic of some sort. And most of us think that that's the Ark of the Covenant. It's probably at least one of them. But at either case, they apparently keep it until the millennial reign, and then they bring it up to Messiah. So there's a lot of interesting things in Scripture and in legends, but we may not be putting them together right. Still love studying that stuff. Super chat, $5. Thank you very much. The next book, Dr. Ken, the next book I will donate to our Calvary Chapel is your John and Jude. The pastor loves your book of Jasher. Oh, great. He gives that to the church leaders. Fantastic. Yeah. So it's not to say that everything in it is 100% accurate. We can't really say that, but it does give a lot more information and it makes sense. So that's cool. Thank you very much. It's always good to hear that it's, people are looking at things and they appreciate it. I got a phone call from a Calvary Chapel pastor a little ways back asking about the Didache because somebody in his church was teaching about it, what I thought about it. And I told him the history and that it's a great document that it even teaches a pre-trib rapture. And it's written somewhere between 50 and 100 AD. So it's one of the rare ones. It's one of the first century documents. It's not prophetic and it's not from any of the disciples or anything. It's just pastors of local churches said, this is how we probably ought to run stuff so that we're not scammed. It's got some great advice in it. Anyway, and so he asked me if I had a translation, and we have one on our network, but it's not in a book form or anything. But so we're trying to do all that kind of stuff too and make all that stuff available because it's fantastic. I still today hear people tell me that the rapture was invented by Darby in the 1700s. And it's just like, it'd be like if someone told you the King James Bible was just published for the first time in 1970. We all know better than that. Our grandparents had King James Bibles. It's a lot older than that. Might be wrong, might be right, but it's a lot older than that. So it's amazing how things like that keep coming out. And when you go back and you look at things, Irenaeus, Justin Martyr, all these guys, it's like, okay. Question then. Are the soul and the spirit the same or somehow distinct? Thank you so much for your wonderful ministry and teachings. Thank you. I believe they're distinct. And the thing is, and when you talk to different people that believe the opposite, they'll point out rightly that a lot of times in scriptures, they're used interchangeably. So it seems like you could be talking about my soul or my spirit is grieved or whatever. And sometimes they're used interchangeably. However, there are other places that clearly talk about we are a body, soul, and spirit. So I don't know exactly the definition of each one, but apparently the body and the soul and the spirit are three pieces of what we are, and they're not the same. So body I know pretty well, but in this body there's a soul and a spirit. So I believe that they're distinct. I don't get it. What is hyper charismatic? Oh, okay. Charismatic or Pentecostal denominations believe that the gifts of the Spirit still function. So I'm with a Calvary Chapel. I go to Calvary Chapel, Johnson County, in Olathe, Kansas, that is. And so we would all agree that the gifts of the Spirit function. Now, there are churches that believe in the gifts also that don't follow Paul. Like Paul said, you don't speak in tongues unless there's an interpreter. And you don't do certain things except doing it in this way to maintain order. Because what happens is somebody says, I think the Holy Spirit's speaking through me, and then they give a false prophecy. And so you're supposed to, the leadership of the church is supposed to quell that. So if I don't know you and you think you have a prophecy, you come tell me. And then if it turns out to be correct, I'll let the congregation know, unless you've proven yourself. That's basically how Paul would outline it. So when people say hyper charismatic, it would be people that think they're prophets or that think they're prophesying, or maybe they just babble and they think that's an actual language, or they think there's a demon around every corner. Now, there very well could be demons. Somebody can be possessed, and I've been in a lot of situations where I believe to be angelic or demonic. We've got lots of stories like that. But, just because something goes bang in my house at night, I don't immediately think it's a demonic attack. It's probably a pipe or something, So my first thought is, I hope the roof's not leaking. But that's a hyper charismatic. They take things too far. They don't balance it out. So hopefully that helps. Diana, gifted 5 memberships, Level Angel. Thank you very much. Again, thank you all for the helping donate and those kind of things. Super sticker, $10. Thank you very much for the donation. Super chat, $10. Thank you. Well, thank you very much. And last question here is, what is NAR? It's the New Apostolic. My mind just glitched there. New Apostolic Reformation. Yeah. Um, Basically, like the question before about a hyper charismatic, most of us would take the NAR to be people that are hyper charismatics. They think they're prophets. They think they're speaking for the Holy Spirit. They think they're following the Holy Spirit, but they're usually teaching prophecy wrong. A lot of them are post-trib. A lot of them have this kingdom now concept where, the Lord doesn't come back and fix everything. We rise up, kill off all the bad guys, form a Christian world government, and then, the Lord comes back. And none of that's biblical. That's actually, leading people into the area of falling for the Antichrist. So, and I don't know anybody particular that I can say by name in the NAR, but that's what most of us would put that group with. New Apostolic Reformation. A lot of them would claim to be not prophets necessarily, but apostles. Now, by definition, an apostle is someone who studied under Jesus. So there's no way that those guys could be an apostle on the same level, at least. Apostle is also used like for a missionary. It means a sent one. So in that case, they could be an apostle. But they're usually tell you stories about how Jesus came and talked with them. They had dinner with Jesus yesterday and he told them this and those kind of stories. And you're like, yeah, I don't think so. Especially when what they say contradicts scripture. So that's why we got to be really careful. So I would even say, like I've said before, I'm a Calvary Chapel guy. Just because you walk into a Calvary Chapel doesn't mean it's a perfect church. It could be possibly a really bad church. But most of them are really good. I would rather see you go to a Calvary Chapel, mainly because the idea is that they teach the scriptures verse by verse. So if we were in Acts 19 last week, unless it's Christmas or something special happened, we'll be in Acts 20. And if there is something special, next week we'll be in Acts 20. We're just going to keep going down the road. So really important for that. But yeah, thank you very much for that. I do want to remind you that we've had our second channel. And so right now, the main text that's up there is just 3rd Corinthians. So if you want to go there, subscribe. We're trying to get it set up. So we've got some teachings over there, which we will leave until we get our 4,000 subscriber point where we can get monetization set up and, all that kind of stuff and get it going. But we want to have all those basic texts. So we'll have like 3rd Corinthians. We're working on Gad the Seer. We're going to do most of those other things, a lot of the church father stuff, just so that you can listen to them like you would the King James Bible. We might even be able to put the Bible on there too. It would be nice to have one channel that's not, there's no study or guesswork. I can't be wrong because I didn't give you my opinion. It's just someone reading the text, and then the text is out there for you. So it's a new thing we're trying to do. We also have a network where it's kind of like Facebook. It's with Mighty Networks, but it's private and it's censorship free. So if you want to talk about how you believe this or that, I'll tell you a good job or I totally disagree, but you're not going to get kicked off by Facebook or Meta or anything like that. So very, very important for us. And then we have our support for the ministry with Give, Send, Go and PayPal both. So wanted to just mention those things to you. So we're going to continue working on this. Next week, we should probably start our study on the prophecies like we were talking about. Where'd it go? This one. Yeah. So we'll probably start with this, go forward. I'm going to show those videos and we'll have a Q&A over them. And then it'll be nice to have, because these are some of the questions we get asked all the time. How do you get 32 AD? How do you get 1948 and 1967? And, because I've said over and over again about how it's not just that Israel comes back and they take back the Temple Mount. That's in there 5 or 6 times, that it happens. But there are specific prophecies that tell you exactly when they do that. and the dates are there. And so we go over the math and the calendar and show you the dates. So we come up with 32, 1948, 1967, and then this new one from the scroll, probably 2026. We'll wait and see what happens. So I'm not trying to set dates. I'm not a prophet. I'm just saying, here's a scroll, here's a scripture. It looks like it's saying this. If I'm right, let's add these numbers up and see where it goes. So we're just researching. I've been wrong before, and I'm sure I'm going to be wrong again, but I've also been right in a few of these things too. So we'll continue doing that. So we'll go ahead and say good night for this time, and we'll be back next week. God bless you guys.